those last few seconds, Jimmy, for some reason takes so long.
And I love watching the videos. The three of us are sitting there like we don't know what to do during the whole thing.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. Welcome to another episode of Teams Rooms Tech Talk. Jimmy, we're on a roll. This is episode 14.
We got a lot of good stuff. We got a lot of things coming up, but today is something really, really special. It's something that I've been involved with. Matt Slomka, you and I have been talking about this for a very long time, and you took the initiative and actually made this document. So kudos to you. But Michelle, I think we got a lot to go through today.
Oh, we got a lot to go to. But before we do that, let's shout out a couple of people. Thanks again for everyone joining. I'm still amazed. I say this every episode of how many people from all around the world come up to the show. I see Simon dialing in from London, Bob from Rotterdam, UK. Oh, Daryl Hunter is here. Daryl is working on something very special. He's from Louisville, Kentucky. A couple of people from the A. I see you there, Peter, and an anonymous user. Munich, Detroit. I see more German folks, Poland, Zurich. There's so much going on already. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to ask them. But for now, Matt, for the people, I think you showed up on the show that we did with, who was it? But you showed up on.
I think I crashed the one with Kim.
Oh, yeah, you did crash the one with Kim. Indeed. For the people that have no idea who you are, could you briefly introduce yourself and what you do at Microsoft?
Sure. So Matt Slomka, program manager as part of the Teams product group. I'm focused on helping customers adopt Teams rooms in what I like to say is weird and complex spaces, but also in helping deployment guidance, field configuration, things like that. So what we're here to talk about today.
Matt, you get that one room that everybody wants to talk about and comes into Microsoft and says, well, show us how to do this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The bulk deployments, everybody's kind of got handled now. Now it's okay, we're trying to do this crazy thing that nobody talks about but it's really, really important for my execs. And how do I do it? That's kind of where I come in.
Yeah, but I think, the playbook that we're going to actually go through today, I think that actually helps in that grand scheme of, okay, I don't want to deploy one. I don't want to deploy two. I want to deploy hundreds or thousands of these systems, and I need to know where is all of this. And I think for our partners, it really helps them because it gives them an organizational tool to help the customers and say, oh, we're going to put in Teams rooms. Well, here's how you do everything on your side so that I can do everything on my side as a partner and make sure that everything's good.
Exactly. Yeah. And so prior to be working at Microsoft, I was a customer trying to deploy these at scale. So I know the pain points and the things that you might stumble across along the way. So the deployment playbook in particular is very geared towards how do you deploy these successfully at scale so that it's not a conversation of, oh, well, you need to go physically touch every single one, or, oh, here's what happens when something goes wrong. And yeah, sorry, you got to go touch all of them. It's like, that's not really possible when it's halfway across the world. So how do we make that conversation a lot easier?
And I know we're going to have people asking in the chat, can we download the playbook? So before we even show you this thing, the link is, and we'll show you multiple times during today's show, ak.ms/teams-devices-deployment-playbook. It's an amazing link. I don't know who came up with it, but this is the place where you can find this playbook. How did you get started on this, Matt? Because it's quite an extensive deck now.
Yeah, so this started out with a conversation with a couple of my peers, as well as some folks from the Converged Comms community, and compiling all this together of places where customers were running into challenges, places where customers were having questions, places where we had integrators and partners having questions, and then just overall, how do we get everything into one spot to have that conversation? Now, important to note, nothing in here isn't published somewhere else, but this is a great aggregate of everything with links to the public documentation. Now, I did this and we architected this for a couple of reasons. One, because every time something changes, we update the docs articles, but then I didn't want to republish the playbook every single time we change something. So this just links off to the documentation for the most part. And there's still times where I have to go through and update things. So we keep it up to date. But that was kind of the initial thing, was how do we aggregate everything so you could hand this to a customer, or if you're the customer, you could sit down and go through step by step how to get these devices up and running and scaled.
Good stuff. Let's get into the table of, for me, I've always said that Microsoft is like one big Easter basket, and we have these amazing eggs hidden all around the interwebs. But actually, this is the one Easter basket that you want because it already has all the eggs in it.
And Michelle, if you look at this slide, this has a very important feature on it as well. You know, Matt, this is a living document. And this doesn't stay static. You and I have already put in things that, oh, we need to actually update this and we need to bring this into it. And we're looking at expanding. If there's things that people know about or challenges that we get, that support gets, that partners get, that anybody gets and thinks it should be in here, aka.ms/Teams Playbook feedback, that goes to the people that are authoring this document itself so that we can actually expand on it. And there was just a new one that was published this week.
Yeah, so there were a couple of edits that I had to make that folks raised in comments. One thing, I was wrong. Hey, you know what? We can go ahead and fix that. No problem. At the same time, there were some new things that came out. We now have Android devices in the Pro Management Portal. Cool. That was called out as coming soon. Now we've marked that as done, and we've added a couple of new things into the deck. So this is a living, breathing document that we go through and edit and refresh as it makes sense. So absolutely download it, use that link, go through and, access it as you need to.
Okay. Let's go to let's start with you. We're just gonna walk through the whole thing, and then I'm sure you'll have some comments. You really start with the basics, right? So also people that are new to the Teams devices, because it's not just rooms. There's hub in there, there's phone in there as well, there's board in there. So if this is completely new to you, you start with the fundamentals.
Exactly, yeah. So this whole slide deck starts with baseline fundamentals of what are Teams devices, and then talk through here's the different categories for Teams devices. What fits into which spaces and why, which conversation maps to what you're trying to achieve. So this covers everything from Teams rooms to Surface Hub to panels to phones and displays.
You're going to see a lot inside of this document that has to do with things that I don't deal with on a daily basis. Phones, I know about them. I know how to deploy them. I know how to actually do a lot, but I'm not deep into that. And many times what I actually do is I keep this around because, trying to go and Bing links or things like that when we're struggling to figure out exactly where it is. It's the Microsoft thing. You'll have 100 different things come up and you go, oh, well, there's one link that I remember seeing and where is it? And I don't know where it is. And you've actually got to come back and do it. And Michelle, you just came on a great sort of chart right here that says, am I in a personal? Am I in a shared space? What actually am I doing? And a lot of these things, even partners, they jump to question number 3 or question number 4 when they're having discussions with a customer. But we really need to start with, this is the basics, and we need to level set everybody. And our first conversations with the customer shouldn't be, well, let's talk about the one room that needs all of this integration. Let's talk about the spaces that you want to do and how you're going to Teams enable all of those spaces.
Exactly. Yeah. And really, this comes down to a space conversation and a use case conversation as you go through these deployment methodologies. Not so much well, you know what, we're going to put Teams rooms everywhere. Maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe there's scenarios where Teams displays makes more sense, or maybe there's scenarios where a Teams phone makes more sense, and some combination thereof. And so understanding what those different use cases are helps give those different device selection conversations. Then you can filter down into, okay, great. This is the space I'm building towards. This is the devices that make sense and why. And then, okay, great. I've picked a Teams room on Android device. How do I manage it? How do I deploy it? We link off down to that documentation, and you can have that continuous conversation then of, okay, great, we've picked it. Now we know how to deploy it. Now we know how to secure it. And you can work your way through this document from top to bottom as you start out brand new from scratch with that conversation.
So how do people read these slides, Matt?
Say that again, Mitchell?
Yeah, say that again.
So how do people read these slides? How do they go to the different steps?
Yeah, so the intent here is you work through that initial conversation. Your next piece is the device selection process. So what you're in now for the various slides, the goal being that you're looking at it and going, okay, what type of experience am I trying to achieve? Is this something that I'm going to put in a personal space? And so, great. I'm going to put it, and it's going to be something that I want to maintain a user's identity. A user's going to sign in with their credentials, or is it something that's going to be in a shared space that I want to have its own personality, its own calendar, its own scheduling capability, and have it be a separate device? Then you map into, okay, what type of device am I looking for? So am I looking for something that's just a phone? Like, There are times where all that you want is a phone, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's totally all right. Like, we preach the audio, video, hybrid work conversations, but there are times where a phone just makes sense. You want to be able to just walk up, pick it up, make a call, put it back down, be done. Easy enough. So working through that piece. Then if it's a room, what type of device makes sense in that space? Is it something that you want full collaborative whiteboarding and accessing documents on? Then maybe a hub's the right option. Is it something that you just want to deploy in a space and it's more of an all-in-one scenario, or you want to deploy an Android-based management system? Great. And then from there, different considerations around what peripherals go with that is kind of the fourth column. And then depending on what device you pick, there's a link to how to deploy that jumps you down to the exact slide to deploy that type of device, or you can just scroll through the document and go find it too. Either way, you land in the right spot.
Yeah, so all of these things here in the bottom left are links. You can link directly to that part of the playbook. What are some of the important concepts that people can find here in the deck?
I love every single bullet point starts with
Yeah.
certified.
Yes. The amount of preaching that we do around certified devices in this deck is very purposeful in the why. But the focus here is on, why does Microsoft certify devices? What are certified devices? And then what is the list of certified devices or peripherals in some scenarios for the different devices? So what you see here is links off to our public documentation for each of the different certified devices, as well as the why behind the certification conversation. That way you make sure that what's deployed is actually certified, supported, and manageable by Microsoft. That way you're in a good scenario going forward from support purposes, from break fix purposes, from patch management, anything like that. Certified devices are the answer. Stick in that space. You'll have a much better scenario than the escalations we get on uncertified devices.
And Simon's not wrong in the fact that they always want a phone until the day after it's been installed, because customers will come with, I want this. And I think this document gives a purposeful conversation with the customer. Instead of them coming in with their predetermined expectation, let's go ahead and have that conversation. Let's go ahead and show them all the different things that can do. The slides that we were on before that have the how to deploy and give a description about the display types and all the different things that it can do. That's an important thing. But you may have customers that come in and like Simon says, I want a phone. So what do? You give them a phone if you don't have this conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
You were saying this is a good link for the most recent version of the doc. It probably is. I would always advise to use the ak.ms because Matt and the team are making sure that always leads to wherever the latest version sit. I think we're known for moving things around a little bit every now and then.
Yeah, every time I have marketing republish a new version of the playbook, that longer docs link changes. So use the short link because we repoint that to the new version of the document each time. That may or may not be the right one. I don't know if the 104,000th object it downloads is the right one or not.
I will make sure we put this in the YouTube description as well. If you somehow missed it, we'll make sure we put it in there.
Yeah, and I think this slide, actually getting back to the playbook, really is important as well. Design, implement, and monitor. So you've got stages that you can actually go through. You can talk to the customer. Okay, we're in the design stage. We just went through that up top, and we decided what we're going to do. Now, how do we implement it? And then after we implement it, how do we actually monitor it? Because all of these are very important stages to have a customer successfully adopt Teams devices. If you don't do one of these, there is a chance they will not look and say, oh, we've been successful in doing this. And like you said, Matt, there's so much inside of this playbook that has links to public sites, but each individual stage that we go through with the customer needs to be successful so that they can see what they can do. We've got plenty of customers that come out to the Hive, come out to different places. Microsoft ourselves are following all of this guidance to get all of our conference rooms up and running. And if we don't do one, we're not going to be successful in the next one as well.
Yep.
Exactly.
Shall we jump into MTR on Windows? Just look at some of the different steps.
Now,
and again,
now.
you can see. Go ahead, Jimmy.
If I'm a partner, Michelle, I am looking at this slide specifically, and I am going, this is in my information that gets sent to a customer's IT department to make sure that they know what is expected of them to go through and actually start everything that needs to be done on the account for Teams Rooms on Windows. So many people think, oh, well, I'll just go into the device settings and I'll set it there and I'll do that. That's not the way that these devices, that's a very sort of old school sort of thinking about AV devices. These are modern devices, and many of the configurations happen inside of the account itself.
Exactly, Jimmy. And the other important thing to note is these devices have a lot of touch points in Office 365, in the rest of the Microsoft suite, across the internet. There are considerations here that didn't exist in your legacy video conferencing days, where everything was on-prem, talking to one thing and you were done. Now you talk to Exchange, you talk to Teams, you talk to SharePoint. You have a lot more touch points in other services. Now, it's great because that gives you a lot more capability than what you got out of your legacy VTC stack. But at the same time, how do you make sure that what's here actually works every time? And how do you make sure that the right pillars in a customer's organization are addressed in order to deploy these at scale? So having those conversations with their AD admin, with their Exchange admin, with their Teams admin, and making sure that all the right folks know what you're trying to achieve. And then what we've got up here now is even shifting into the Intune conversations and how do you deploy these at scale? So great, you can follow the instructions on the slide before, and you can deploy one sitting next to you without much of a problem. You could deploy at scale that way too. There's going to be a lot more steps and manual adjustment you're going to do on each MTR if you do it that way. If you follow these steps too, though, you can automate almost the entire deployment of Teams Rooms beginning to end, to where then you've got a baseline set of configuration across the board for every Teams Room on Windows device. They're all up to speed, they're all manageable, they're all configurable, and you just follow these various steps to get there. And this walks you through how to do each of these things. You know, the amount of times I've had conversations with customers of, we need to change the local admin password on the devices, but we don't want anybody to know what it is, but we need to change it on all of them. It's like, okay, fine. Drop that in there, go through and do the config, run the PowerShell script on it. Now you've changed the local admin password on all the devices. And then, hey, you know, you want to set a group of users to be admin? Easy. Drop the group in there, drop their accounts into that group. Boom. Now that group is local admin on the devices and everybody signs in uniquely. You hit some of those security conversations at the same time, all in this playbook, all in one bulk deployment.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and it's funny, Michelle. Look at the last bullet. That's one of the last bullets that's there. You know, set proxy settings. If you ask any of us at Microsoft, what's our first response when people say, "Well, you know, I've got a proxy. Let's bypass the proxy. Let's get out of here." But here's actually a document that shows you, all right, if you can't bypass a proxy, go ahead and do it. So just by word of mouth or telephone and those kind of sort of things, you're going to hear, yeah, don't do the proxy. Yeah, don't do the proxy. Don't do the proxy. But if you're actually giving them the guidance of here's how we can do it and here's what we can do, that really helps that conversation move forward with the IT department of the customer site.
And trust me, you're spot on, right? The checklist is super useful.
Correct.
Bart is asking, for the AK.ms, do you need a personal Microsoft account to get to this resource? No, as Alvaro is saying, it is publicly available. The AK.ms is just a shortening service that we use in Microsoft, but this is available for everyone. Android?
Well, Android is a different beast. That's why we're splitting this up into Windows, Android, and you'll see Surface Hub, phones, and others. There are things that are shared between these devices, but there are also things that are unique. You know, we talk about it, Matt, you, me, Michelle, all the time. We go, Android is Android is Android. And 9 times out of 10, when you get to a customer site and they're trying to do their first Teams device, they don't even think about Android because maybe they're in an iOS shop on their mobile device. So what did they do? They said, block all Android devices on my network. Conditional access is something important that we're going to have the conversation with. And Tracy, my favorite game show with Michael Tressler, can you stump her? All of these things, we can teach these things and we can go through it. But again, these are public facing links that you can have the conversation. The chances are, there are people at the customer that understand conditional access and can talk about it. But if you can't, then we're not going to be able to get this device on their network.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the one other piece that I want to call out on this slide is that Android Device Administrator enabled checkbox there. That stumps a lot of customers because Google has said, hey, Device Administrator is being deprecated. You should use Android Enterprise. And so customers have turned off Device Administrator in their tenants. Well, none of your team's devices are going to work if you've got Device Administrator disabled. They're all going to go through a failed sign in, and you're just going to get to this weird error message and not know what to do with it. And it's a simple checkbox that you can go turn back on, and then suddenly the devices work. But knowing that ahead of time and getting over that hurdle and avoiding the, oh, this isn't working, let me raise a ticket, let me go through support, for support to just tell you, yeah, go check the box. If you can just go through that checkbox ahead of time and know that, then you're good to go. And yes, Android Device Administrator has been deprecated by Google. It has not been deprecated by Microsoft, by the OEMs that create our devices, or by Android Open Source Project overall. It's still in use, still supported, still functional today. We are working on a new methodology around it. That's a different conversation, but yes, still needed, still required. I have that conversation with customers a little too often.
If you're having issues downloading the PowerPoint deck, just send me a DM on LinkedIn. I'll make sure you get a copy for now. But let's see if you can try and fix it, because this thing gets updated quite a lot. Jimmy, anything you would like to cover for this slide before we go into Hub? There's so much, and we have so little time, and I want to make sure we cover everything.
I know. I think Matt's Android Device Administrator speech was spot on, and I think it's something that we talk about a lot, and we go through, and we actually do have documentation to it. But again, not going through this checklist as a partner, as a customer, and things like that. You're gonna have all these questions, and you're gonna wonder why. When we can actually, Matt, you and I do it all the time. We copy the slide, we actually send it, and we paste it, and we put it into different places, and we just you circle exactly the one that you want to do, and here you go, guys. And to Michael Tressler's Flinchbot's comment too. The checklist is super helpful. It really is. Just having it and just going through it. Again, we are not deploying one device. We are looking at deploying so many other devices. With that stat that we all talk about on there of 1 out of 10 rooms is actually enabled with technology, even on the side of a phone, which means when we go back to the office, 9 out of 10 rooms need to have some sort of technology in them. If we can look at a deployment that has that ability to scale, that's where we're all going to be successful.
Service Hub, a lot of exciting news at Enterprise Connect, obviously, around Service Hub and Teams Rooms on Windows. Until then, there is also a Service Hub section here in the playbook.
Exactly. Yeah. And this will continue for organizations that choose not to convert to the Teams Room on Windows operating mode for Service Hub, as we announced on Enterprise Connect. This will continue until those are end of life, and that's out of support. But this gives a similar set of step-by-step instructions. It's very similar to the Teams Room on Windows guidance on this slide. The next slide has a bit more Surface-specific things, because there are Surface-specific capabilities that you can run on Hub that are typically deployed out of Intune. This kind of walks through those steps, and more of our device-specific capabilities, 802.1x support and things like that are all called out here as well, and just getting that bulk deployment piece working really well on Hub.
Yes.
And Michelle, if we want to go quickly through the next ones, Teams Panel, Teams Phone, I do want to get to the eye chart that we have at the end. Because there are specific slides that I think are really important. You can see here, Teams Panel, another Android device that lives on there. Teams Phone, or in the common area phone, you're going through it. The next one would be Teams Phone Personal and Teams Display. Every single device is covered here, even the hot desking side. So many things were announced at Enterprise Connect around hot desking. How do we actually set up these devices for hot desking? I've had that question since Enterprise Connect.
Mm-hmm.
And what have I done? I've taken this slide and I've actually sent it, and I said, here you go. The idea of, the password expiration, disabling that's common, where they'll say, oh, well, we can't do that. Yes, you can. And here's the guidance of how you can do it. So a really good guidance, again, with having this and everything. So if we go to the next section of security and networking, I think there's a lot to cover inside of here, Matt.
Yeah, there's so much we can cover in here.
Yeah.
So I'll do my usual spiel for security considerations, particularly around the resource accounts. That tends to be the biggest sticking point with customer security teams. Great. As Jimmy mentioned, password expiration. You can put password expiration on your devices. have at it. It's not supported, and you will break your devices, because 90 days from now, suddenly your devices will stop working. It'll be like, well, what happened here? It's like, well, you let all the passwords expire, so now they're signed out, and you got to go change the passwords and sign them back in. If you want to do that every 90 days, fine. I'd like to think that hopefully there's something else that you can be doing with your time, but whatever works. At the same time, transitioning into the multi-factor conversation. So I harp on this one every time we have this call, and Jimmy knows this spiel really well at this point. But as you walk into customers' conversations around their security teams and with their security teams for these resource accounts, don't go to them, or if you're the customer and you're going to see your security team, don't go and say, turn off MFA, because what immediately happens is security freaks out and says, nope, we're not doing it. You got to deploy something else. No. It's like, no, it's not that you need to turn off MFA. It's that these accounts need to have a different methodology for MFA employed upon them. So what they don't have is the rooms don't have an iPhone or an Android phone to click the approve button on in the Authenticator app of choice, because, well, they're rooms. And no, you can't give it to the facilities person and assign it to the facilities person, so they're hitting approve at 2 a.m. every day when the devices reboot. That's not a really usable scenario either, because security will be like, no, because we're training the user to just click approve all the time. So what you have to do instead is have the conversation around, how do you mitigate that same risk that you'd mitigate with the second device, and go, hey, is it a managed device that has a known posture? Is it something where it's on a known network that you have security controls around? And so, cool, you can tick that MFA box using alternative mitigation. So the conversation is not, how do we turn off MFA? It's, how do we mitigate the account so that even if somebody got the username and password, you can't do anything with that account because it's on a protected network and it's still protected by MFA. So that's where you leverage conditional access, you leverage some of the security policies, and you go through the rest of this deck to lock down those resource accounts and help have that security conversation.
Yeah, security is there for a reason. They're there to protect it. So if you go in and you say, I don't want any security, they're going to push back on you. But if you explain and have the conversation, again, having that slide helps you have that conversation with the security team of, this is why. And when they see that, oh yeah, this is right, and this is actually the way that Microsoft guides us to do this, they're going to turn around and they're going to go, okay, well, now we can take it to the next step. And maybe we have to put this through pen testing. Maybe we have to make sure that it's there. Okay, but we have overcome a hurdle even without having an argument about, well, we definitely need MFA.
Yeah, exactly. You avoid that.
Yeah. And this, Matt, is one of the great charts that I think is really here. You've got everything sort of there, from Teams rooms on Windows all the way across the Teams rooms displayed. And what do you need to actually look at?
Exactly. Customers' conversations every time with security, whether it be the firewall folks, the proxy folks, the network folks, whomever it might be in a security organization, it's always, what do we need to allow for the device to work? Well, here's the list of what you need to allow in order for the device to work. Is it pretty? It's an eye chart, but at the end of the day, you can go through and decide, okay, here's what I need to be able to access. Here's what my device needs to be able to get to in order to function correctly. And then you have that conversation early in the process so that you don't get to the customer site, plug in the first device, and then go, oh, we need a firewall change. This is going to be a couple weeks. It's like, well, that just messed up your whole deployment. So if you can have that conversation and check all those boxes ahead of time, suddenly you remove a bunch of the speed bumps and hurdles and things that you're going to run into along the way deploying your initial set of devices.
Yeah, and I think the third one down, Intune, if you look on Teams Room on Android, required, but optional on Windows. And that's a sticking point that a lot of people, when they're doing their first Teams Rooms on Android, you're going to have the Intune specialist at the customer site have access to what is being put on the network so that they can understand this is what we need to do. And again, going back to those other slides with Teams Rooms on Android, he's then going to be handed that slide and told, okay, here's how everything gets set up. And then you're going to actually be able to have that conversation with those teams. Whereas before, it's just like, yeah, we need Intune. What do you need? And that's where so many of these conversations sort of stick to the point of you've got a whole bunch of different teams here, and this document can bring everybody together.
Exactly.
You want to take this one? Do you recommend VLANs?
So absolutely recommend VLANs. So Teams rooms devices don't need to access anything on-prem. So if you can do an isolated VLAN that just gets to the internet, that keeps the security conversation easier too for the devices themselves. So, a lot of this deployment playbook is focused on how do you get the devices connected to Office 365 functional, working in a secured state from that perspective, get the resource accounts secured. There is still that conversation of, well, I'm deploying devices on my network. How do I have that conversation and make sure that they're secure? If you can put them on a VLAN that's isolated from the rest of the corporate network and can just get to the internet, or maybe you've got proxy rules and weird things in place on other VLANs, but if you can segment it and take that VLAN and punt it directly to the internet and skip all the proxy stuff, awesome. Do that. Do local internet breakout. Let them get to the internet as soon as possible. You have a better media quality conversation. So absolutely, VLANs are there. Do I have customers that deploy without VLANs? 100%. But the more you can segregate the devices from the rest of your network, the better.
Yeah.
And this is something that if you are a Microsoft partner, we're going to be touching on a lot during the boot camp that's coming up in May. While Jimmy and Matt talk, I'll try and find the link and paste it somewhere. But you can still sign up for that one. And we're going to be spending a lot of time, one, on this playbook, but also a lot of time on technical stuff like Intune and conditional access, which is the next chapter that we're now landing at. I'm going to search for the link for the bootcamp while you talk.
Yeah, conditional access, Matt, this is something that a lot of people it's their first time actually doing conditional access because they've never thought about it. I mean, we talked about it before in that network assessment, the idea that it's got to come through and it's got to go through all these different checks to say, okay, is this allowed on the network? And that's the idea. Multi-factor authentication is a great thing for a personal side because you've got, number one, the password that you know and something that you have, which is the phone. The problem with MFA with shared devices is not something that you have. Nobody has the phone for those shared devices. So by actually going through conditional access and by actually looking and saying, okay, where is this device coming from? That can be very powerful in actually securing the device itself.
Yeah, conditional access is probably one of the most powerful tools we have across the Office 365 stack of being able to secure those accounts and do different configurations for different things. So, Jimmy, to your conversation earlier around how customers may have straight up blocked Android devices from accessing Office 365 in their environment, which if they've taken that and decided that, hey, your Android phone can't access Office 365, fine. If your Android device can't access Office 365, that's okay. But at the same time, you need to allow your team's Android devices to access Office 365 in order for your phones to function, your rooms, your panels, whatever it might be. So having that level of granularity to say, I'm going to allow these devices in, but I'm not going to allow someone's personal mobile device to sign in, that's a great security control capability that you've got there. You've just got to know how to implement it correctly. And using the what if tool that you see linked here helps a lot as well, because you can go into that what if tool and say, hey, I'm signing in with this account from this type of device. Am I going to be allowed in or not? So you don't have to sit there and test every single time of, okay, great, I've changed a policy. Let me see if it works now. Well, no, use the what if tool, do your config correctly, make sure everything's ready to go. Then you're not going to hit those blocks along the way. Maybe you do that setup ahead of time, and then next week you're going and plugging in your first device. But now you know that it's going to actually sign in successfully, and you're not going to hit these hurdles.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And I see, Michelle, if we want to put up this question, is there a way to change the default password without physically accessing the computer? I think this is one question that I get a lot. And I say, there's no need to really visit the device anymore. I mean, these are modern devices that we want to do this. Yes, we can do this, but it really comes down to which device are we talking about? Are we talking about Android? Are we talking about phones? Are we talking about Teams rooms on Windows? Where are we actually looking? And that's where, again, there's a lot of information. That one question probably has about 6 different answers to it.
Teams on Windows devices through Intune, the config's listed there. Teams Android devices, the config can be done through TAC. You can set a default password in TAC and push that down as a config profile, and you're good to go. So actually just 2 answers, luckily.
Wow, you can get into it with a whole bunch of things, but yes, easiest way is the 2 answers, going through it. But like we said, Intune enrollment for Android required. Intune enrollment for Windows optional, and actually having the links so that you know exactly where to go in Endpoint Manager, where to go in all of these different portals that Microsoft has. As an admin inside of a Microsoft tenant, you realize there are so many different places that you can look. And once you find a hurdle, it's sometimes challenging to know, all right, where am I actually looking for all of this, and what is actually preventing me from actually getting on?
Exactly.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think these illustrations really help as well, because it's understanding where and how the device is authenticating and where it's going through. So understanding where MFA gets enforced, where all of the different things about location-based routing and things like that, understanding where those enforcement policies are, even the AAD conditional access rules, understanding that this is inside of Intune, this might be inside of Endpoint Manager, but this might be inside of another place. All of this is inside of this device deployment playbook, so that you can go through and you can be confident in what your deployment is actually going through.
Exactly. And this maps it all out and matches exactly how you do the config and conditional access and what you can do. And there's a comment on LinkedIn of they have a customer who bought a phone that's an MFA phone, which sits in the room. Perhaps you should show them these slides and map out the better way to do it than that.
Yeah, Pascal, we get it too. We get it too. Yeah. So yeah.
But what happens when that phone dies? What happens when someone walks out of the room with that phone? I mean, there's so many scenarios where that falls apart. Or what's stopping someone from just hitting approve all the time? I mean, there's so many bad things with doing that. Leverage the conditional access policies and do it correctly.
Yeah. And Michelle, if we go to the next section, this is another one that really, Matt, we get questions all the time. All right, I've deployed, let's say 100 Teams rooms. All right, do I need the third-party portal? Do the OEM portal? Do I just need pro management? What do I actually need, and how am I going to have this conversation? And the answer is really, you've got a lot of different things, but here in the device deployment, we sort of go and we say, all right, here's what we're recommending and how we would actually recommend you go through it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this maps out, what's possible, what's available. Everything's been delivered at this point. So what you see here is what's possible, what we recommend then at the bottom, called out between Teams Admin Center and the Pro Portal. And then actually on the next slide, we walk through what do we recommend? And again, another eye chart, but this maps out everything. And we're actually using this for some conversations internally too, but this maps out everything that's possible and that we recommend for the different devices as you go through those management conversations. And now you'll notice this is a very Microsoft-centric deck. So we tend to recommend the Microsoft available tools to have that conversation. But again, they are platform agnostic then, so you can do them across different devices and across different OEMs and have a consistent management plane for all of your team's devices. And how do you achieve that? Great, follow the recommended configs that you see here.
Yeah, and you and I actually had a situation the other week where you taught me something that I could do in SCCM that I didn't know what I could actually do, but it was a customer ask, and I'm like, all right, I'm not sure exactly. I know that maybe and everything else, and you actually helped me through all of the different steps in SCCM. I'm not an expert in SCCM, but the great part about it is we could probably find somebody who is, and that's what we did, knowing that, okay, where do we go and what do we have to do? Because it is something that we can use on Teams rooms on Windows, and it is something that, okay, if you don't have a group policy or something that can deliver this, maybe Intune can't deliver this package or something like that, let's look at SCCM and what our options are.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you'll see that it's not something that we recommend anymore because the goal is shifting to the cloud first management strategies. But there are times still where SCCM is the answer for certain conversations. So, just mapping all of that out and knowing what's possible, everything's here and mapped out for everybody.
Yeah.
Not sure what you can say about this, Matt, but Russ is asking, when will we see more setting options to change on Service Hub within TAC?
So as we shift to the Teams Room on Windows management plane for Surface Hub, you will see the same level of management that you have for Teams Room on Windows devices available for Hub. So I think the announcement said that we're looking for summertime to do that shift and make that available for Hub. So around then would be the best answer I can give at this point.
Yeah.
Keep your devices up to date. One of the final pieces of the playbook.
This is important.
Yeah. So, again, use the Teams Room Pro Management Portal for keeping your devices up to date. That's generally where we're steering everybody these days, because that gives you one consistent update plane, one consistent set of rings. You can use update rings to do it then. So you can scale that update across your organization so that suddenly you're not just like, oh, wait, why do all my Teams rooms look different? If you've seen the new Teams home screen experience that we deployed for Teams Room devices, suddenly, if all of your rooms have this new home screen experience and nobody did any change comms and nobody told anybody in the organization that this is changing, and you just wake up one day and all your rooms are updated, it's like, well, what happened? So, the Pro Management Portal gives you that update control. You can scale it. You can do it in stages. So leverage the Pro Management Portal to do that, but keep your Teams rooms up to date. If customers that go through and turn off any auto updating capability and disable everything and say, no, we don't want these to update, well, your devices fall out of date fairly quickly because we release updates all the time and add new features and new capabilities and bug fixes to things that may have come up along the way. And so if suddenly you're running a version that's a year old, well, you're probably going to have a pretty poor experience. So how do you keep that device up to date? Here's how you keep that device up to date.
Yeah, Matt, it's funny because I get the partners who come to me and say, "Oh, I need to be a part of TAP, or I need to be in preview, and I need to know as soon as these things come out because I have to evaluate them prior to my customer." Well, if you have a plan and your customer is saying to you as a partner, please make sure that you update our devices and make sure that you know what's coming so that we can be aware of it. Well, put your customers on a 30 or 60, 90 day out, but have your devices inside of their lab on the release right away. Then you're actually getting exactly what you want. You're going to see the updates before your customer does, and you're going to evaluate them inside of their lab system. And basically, they're going through it, and you're going to be able to evaluate it. Just being on the bleeding edge of everything that we do. And I can tell you, Ring Zero is not a place that many people want to be. But it is, Michelle, you know me. I don't want to be in there.
We don't tell you anything.
Correct. Just don't tell me anything as long as I don't know, and then I'm safe and I can talk. But the truth is, you have these tools at your availability. You need to understand them, and you need to be able to use them.
Exactly. As someone who's in engineering and all my devices are in some various stage of Ring Zero, you don't want to live there as a customer or as a partner. You'd much rather be on what we've published as a GA build and go test that and validate that before you deploy it to your whole org, rather than, oh, let me try the thing that may or may not come out in the next 6 months and see how that goes. It's easier to live in what we've actually said is stable.
Yeah. One of our more popular streams that we've done, Jimmy, was on support and troubleshooting device issues. So if you haven't seen that one, go back to, I believe it was episode 7. It's all on Teams Rooms Tech Talk, the YouTube channel. But there's one slide here on how to review and then open support case and then download and submit the logs if you have any issues.
Yeah, this is an important part because so many people say, well, how do I create an issue? Or they say, I report a problem, but I don't see anything. Oh, yeah, that's because it opened with us. Yeah. And we got everything that we need. I mean, there's a lot of things inside of here that again, people may not know on a daily basis. I go through this, Matt, and it's one of the documents that I have open so that I can copy and I can paste and I can give people exactly what it is. But I think exposing people to this document and the idea that this is what this is, that was really what we wanted to do today, Michelle, was really sort of get this out there so that partners, customers, everybody sort of knew this is where we go to when we're asked questions.
Yes, fully agree. We have to find a way, by the way, to do all of this in 30 minutes when we do the boot camp. I think that's going to be quite a challenge.
Right?
Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. I think it was another fun show. The link is still up. So if you want to download the playbook, go to ak.ms/team-devices-playbook, download your copy. If you can't figure it out, I am Jimmy, and I'm sure that he will help you to get the playbook. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I think we'll see you again because before we went live, we came up with another new cool topic that we can discuss during the session. Yep, that's how we do it. So we'll probably be back with you in a couple of weeks. We'll see each other at the boot camp as well. Jimmy, it's been fun as always. Everybody, thanks for watching.
Stay here, Matt. Don't go away. We're just going to end the live for something, and then we got some stuff to wrap up.
Jimmy, do you want to do your influencer thing to
Please subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. I don't know. I do it differently each time, but make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is where everything is. Also, Michelle, I want to remind everybody there was a new episode of Mo Mondays today as well. So that dropped. There's a whole bunch of information on Teams Room Tech Talk. If you are doing Teams Room, the deployment playbook is just one aspect of it, but we've got information on there. We've got shows that we do every single week, every single month. And we want to thank everybody for the support that we have. Michelle, it's been great to see everybody out there.
Yes. See you guys on the next one. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.